Everybody wants to know what the key to maximizing their glute training is, and I'm going to tell you why that very key is your big toe. When we think of effective glute training, and I guess when we think of muscle training in general, we need the ability to get into an eccentric orientation to then move through a concentric orientation. So all I'm saying there is that we have to be able to lengthen a muscle to then be able to shorten it through a full range of motion. So what do we need in order to lengthen a muscle? Say what do we need in order to lengthen the glute specifically? The glutes want to do external rotation, abduction to a certain degree, and extension obviously. Well, we need to put them in an internally rotated and flex position to lengthen them. So in order to get internal rotation, well, what do we need? And why do we need that? Now we look at internal rotation of the hip, what we have to understand is that's kind of what stems from the ground up. In a sense, we internally rotate into the ground. It's a down force, right? It's how we apply force into the ground. But also if we're not able to get into those positions at the feet, then we won't be able to get into the position of internal rotation at the hip that we need in order to lengthen the glute. What is the position of the foot that we need for internal rotation? And that's going to be pronation, right? So as the arch of the foot comes down to the ground, so as we go through the different phases of gait cycle, which is how you have to look at training, because human beings, what separates us from other creatures is that we're on 2 feet. Our nervous system, our muscles, they organize us and they move in a certain way that allows us to be on 2 feet. So we have to understand that and how that applies to our training. Now there's a couple different parts to how we walk, our gait cycle, right? So as we go to step out, initially we get heel contact, right? If you were to put your hand on your glute right now, if I were to step out here and as my heel kind of strikes the ground, my glute's really not doing much. But as we transition from that heel strike, that early phase, and we go down and that big toe comes to the ground, now we start to drive a little bit more of extension through the glutes, right? Because now we're going from absorbing force to we need to start transitioning into propulsion, right? And if you look at this, just look at how this happens. Heels off, glutes not doing much. You can start to see glutes are starting to move us forward, extend the hip, and really drive us off as we come through. You notice what's going on that whole time? More and more into my big toe, all right? So the big toe, if we can't get the big toe down and let the foot pronate, then we're never gonna be able to lengthen the glute. And then we're never gonna be able to give the glute more leverage to work in that sense. So what we need with effective glute training is we need to get a foot that can pronate, get flat to the ground. It's not arched up here or rolling outwards to the lateral aspect of the foot, right? We need a foot that can get flat to the ground and we can get big toe pressure. Now, something that you can start to think of when you go to do your glute training, and I guess if I grab the dumbbell here and we start to do a contralateral like a B stance RDL, if I were to cue heel pressure here, right, and go down, if I start to lose toe pressure there, I'm only really, I get a little bit of glutes, but I'm starting to really get into like hamstrings, calves, adductors a little bit, right? What I need to do is I need to cue knees bent, big toe down, whole foot pressure. I'm keeping that knee there and I'm pushing the glute away from the knee. I'm trying to get as much distance as our center mass is being pulled forward. I'm trying to shift back into my glutes so much because my knee's staying there, because my big toe's down. I'm maintaining the tension in my glute to better manage my center mass, change shape, and then be able to use the glute to extend through as we come up. That's what we want. And when we look at it through the frontal plane, if we think about this even more, why we want to see internal rotation is look at if we're here, as we keep that inside the foot down the knee in where it is, we can see that hip starts to come outside of the knee. That again, as we shift through the frontal plane, is another aspect of lengthening the glute. If the glute wants to abduct, then all we're doing here is we're adducting the femur, right? And we're getting this glute to lengthen out. So then if we were to come back the other way, as we come up, it abducts. It goes from internal rotation and adduction to external rotation and abduction as it's doing that function of hip extension too, right? So if we were to look at that, in an open chain perspective, right now, this, as we get this hip shift is the same as being here, right? That's not glutes, but it's lengthening the glutes and allowing us to get a greater range of motion as we abduct, say like some type of cable kickback or something. This is the same as this, right? And we need to understand that. We need to get some type of closed chain interaction between not just hip extension, but internal to external rotation and adduction to abduction if we're trying to get the most out of our glute training. So how do we not want to train the glutes? Well, if we think of the sumo stance, right, this is an example that's so overused and should not be, is we get people into a sumo stance, right? Just look at what my feet are doing. We go from this neutral, more internally rotated position to more abducted and externally rotated. What does the glute max want to do? Well, the glute max wants to abduct and externally rotate as two of its main actions. So what's going on here now then is we're already pre-shortening our glute max, meaning that we don't have much change of length going on. And what we know is that building muscle, getting stronger, generally relies on some type of change in length. You can build muscle with isometrics, you can build muscle with short range exercises, but if we want to maximize muscle development, we need to live somewhere that's kind of mid-range or lengthen bias for most of our work. So this takes us right totally away from lengthen, takes us out of mid-range, and puts us into more of a shortened position. So now we're not getting any change of length if you're doing that kind of sumo thing, especially if you're out even wider. You're doing that kind of sumo thing, you're not getting any change of length in the glutes. You're not effectively targeting the glutes. It's gonna be very sensation rich. You're gonna feel it in your glutes a lot because they're very short, which isn't always a bad thing. If someone needs to learn to feel their glutes, hey, maybe that's the way that you do that, right? But they probably can't feel their glutes because they can't get the proper neutral pelvis position. They can't express internal rotation. They can't get the glute to change shape and lengthen, and that's why they can't feel their glutes. And you know what the big thing is? They can't get their foot to pronate and they can't get their big toe down to the ground. So I'm gonna run you through it again. When we go through gait cycle, look at this. We take a step, heel strikes the ground, glutes not doing much. As we start to pronate the foot, right? That arch starts to collapse as we start to get that big toe to the ground. Internal rotation starts to occur over this leg. We get a lateral hip shift. Glutes are coming to the party a little more. I can feel it. As I bring that other leg through, now my glute's really working. As I'm getting up onto that big toe, now it's like glute city as we push off through here, right? If you were to look at someone sprinting, when they go to push off, boom, right into their glutes. As that big toe gets into extension, we get that kind of max propulsion aspect going. So to wrap it up, if we want to get the most out of our glute training, it does really come down to the big toe. But then from the big toe, we have to think of internal rotation as a down force. So foot goes from an arch to pronation, right? We get out of external rotation, we get into internal rotation to produce force into the ground, to give better leverage to the glutes. Internal rotation of the femur, lateral hip shift if we're in a single leg one, or just genuine, you know, because we're still in internal rotation if we're doing a hinge, genuine internal rotation of the hip to be able to allow the glutes to become eccentric, right? Then we give more leverage to the glutes, we get more stretch on the glutes, and we give more leverage for them to do the concentric work that they want to do. So if you learned something from this, good, I'm happy. If you didn't learn something from this and you still don't believe it, go try it out. Go do the things I do. Go take a step, and as you go through the big toe, feel your glute contract. You know, I got a gym here. If you're local and you don't believe me, you want to come out and try it, I promise you, we can mic you up and you're going to feel your glutes more than you ever have in the past. So let me know. Get in the comment sections if you're still having trouble with this or you don't believe it. We can go online and we can talk about this all you want, but I'm telling you, big toe is your key if you want a big fat ass.